Hey everybody, welcome. It's Tony Zayas back for another episode of the SaaS Founders Show, where we have fascinating conversations with SaaS founders who've gone through some pretty amazing journeys. We get to hear all about their story. Andy Halko, our founder, is my co-host here. How you doing today, Andy?
Fantastic. Getting ready for the winter storm to pound us down, and hoping I don't get locked out of my house or anything.
Keeping the fish alive there.
That's right. They're swimming around having some fun. So I'm really excited for our guest today. Cody, can you give us a little intro about what we're talking about?
Yeah, so we're talking to Cody Horchak. He's the founder and CEO of Zerv, and they offer mobile access solutions to enhance your existing systems. With that, Cody, how you doing today?
I'm doing well, gentlemen. Thanks for having me on the show.
Absolutely. Thank you for joining. We appreciate you taking the time. Tell us a bit about the business. We'd love to hear.
Yes. So from a high level, 30,000 foot view, Zerv found a way to connect the digital and physical world as the physical world exists today, right? So we enable a phone to interact with a barrier. A barrier can be a door, it can be a garage, it can be a turnstile, it can be an elevator, it can be a hotel room, it can be anything. It can even be a car door or those kinds of assets as well. We found a way to take the phone and get it to natively communicate with that asset without needing to rip and replace, buy something new that's more modern enabled. So more modern and mobily enabled, so that what we're able to do is connect physical and digital, complementing what the physical world already has today.
It's amazing. Such a ubiquitous need for everybody, obviously, is getting access. I'd love to start our conversation out hearing about your origin story. How'd you get started? What got you into this? Tell us a little bit about, where this all came from.
Yeah, so this goes back 4 years now, actually. Our 4-year anniversary is in like 3 weeks, which is crazy how time flies, right? So it was out of college, went into finance, like anybody in finance, kind of searching for pains and trying to solve them, right? It's like, and then I met my girlfriend at the time, now wife, and we moved to Chicago, and it was an aha moment. I went into a parking garage to take her out to dinner. The first night we were in Chicago, I ended up spending more on parking than I did for dinner, which was like, welcome to Chicago. Who pays that amount of money for parking? I don't get it. It wasn't even like valet. Like, it's not even a good story. Like, it was literally, I parked myself. Like, I got no service out of it. So went to dinner and ended up spending more on parking than we did for dinner. That's the catalyst of the story. But coming from a finance background was the most frustrating part, because I lived in worlds of supply and demand, and the parking structure was completely empty. So I could have parked anywhere. So like, they should have paid me to park there or whatever. And so the next day started Zerv. Zerv is short for reserve. It actually took us months to come up with the name. But it was all around connecting underutilized assets with individuals like myself who need to use it in a one-off basis. And in order to do that, we needed to connect that physical infrastructure with the digital world so we could seamlessly convert credentials. So think of it as like Airbnb to everything was the catalyst of what Zerv was looking to accomplish. And in doing so, we created the world's only bridge between physical and digital. And therefore now everything has become open so that a phone can communicate with it. So that was the story. A little bit more, fast forward a little bit. We brought on an exceptional team from Motorola that were laid off during the transition from Google to Lenovo. If you guys remember that, going back 4 years now, when that transition happened, they built things like the Motorola Razr. Very, very experienced team in radio frequency. We got really lucky because never again in our lifetime will we have a Fortune 100 company selling a product to another potential, if it was a US listed company, another Fortune 100 company, and then laying off a whole RFT. Right. So we got lucky, and then we built an amazing product. And ever since then, we've just been opening up doors or barriers.
That's great. Since our show speaks to a lot of founders, how did you, were you in another role and you were starting this on the side? Did you dive headfirst in and say, this is my life? Did you find a founder or co-founder? What from that perspective?
Amazing question. So I definitely had 1 foot in, 1 foot out of my previous role. So it wasn't as dive in head first and go, which I applaud those who do. But we had a significant engineering requirement out of the gate that required my income from my full-time job to offset those engineering hours. Because I'm not a tech guy. I was a finance guy. So I couldn't create the tech that was needed. So I needed to hire people. And my full-time job became a cash flow in which was paid to engineers to help build the product.
And we talk to a lot of founders. That's a common story, right? I mean, that's how it has to happen. And so, I mean, I think that's a familiar scenario. And it's almost rare that folks jump full head first into it.
Yeah, it's a more conservative approach. And I if I were to do it again, I would do it the exact same way, because it also gave me a lot of validation of the technology. Like, harder money coming in was going out, and I was seeing the direct response of that capital. I think if you go and you raise a whole bunch of venture capital and you just then jump in head first, the sense of ownership becomes harder to acquire than the route that I took. But then again, different strokes for different folks, and it was a good
decision.
So yeah, it was actually, there's a very interesting story coming out of that, because I did it for about 8 months. And then it got to a point where we were raising institutional fundraising or friends and family. And I had to change my LinkedIn, and they found out about it through my LinkedIn. And they were like, you have to stop doing that. And I was like, that will never happen. So I stepped down.
Good for you.
Wow. So Cody, coming from a background in finance, what kind of challenges did you face, diving in and working with, your engineering and technical team? How did you get past those hurdles?
There's two answers. A lot of trial and error. That's the down and dirty answer that most people don't want to hear, right? It's like, there's a lot of money out that there was no return on investment because it was a learning curve. But then you meet somebody so brilliant and so inspiring that also, inspiring and brilliant people want to work with that individual. So that we got lucky there, and that individual brought a lot of mind power and a lot of people into the organization and have contributed to the success we have today.
I always find it interesting. We've talked to a number of founders that are doing devices, and this, in some ways, challenge of having to engineer a physical product and having to develop a technology and have it all work together. Was that a challenge for you? Did you run into roadblocks? What did that look like?
Oh my gosh, every day. Every day we have a roadblock. Something goes wrong in hardware and software that you have to overcome. And you know what? If any tech company tells you that's not the case, it's they either don't know or they're lying. Think of Apple, think of Android, think of all these that companies that's like every single day you probably force close an app on your iPhone or your Android device because something is glitched out and it's not working. It is a socially acceptable thing to do. And that's no different than where Zerv is. The only difference we have is we're facilitating access into very valuable assets. So the margin of error is a lot narrower. Like people don't seem to give us second, third attempts when we lock them out of really expensive assets. So we have a very high bar because just going into the app and closing it and then relaunching it is in some scenarios unacceptable.
Yeah. So most people start with an MVP, minimum viable product. So in that scenario where you're protecting important assets, how did you handle the MVP process and, putting out something that maybe isn't fully baked, or did you?
Definitely, we're still not fully baked. We're 4 years in, and we have a 4-year roadmap of technology.
Well, the reality for any entrepreneur is nothing's ever fully baked. We're always thinking 10 years ahead.
100%. And that's my job, right? So my job is to, when is a product ready enough for the market to bear it? Because engineers strive for perfection every single time. Right. The business doesn't allow for perfection. So I'm a fan of progress over perfection, because I think the way you reach perfection is you keep progressing in the right direction. And, the bar for perfection is always moving. So my job is to be like, hey, this is the MVP. Or the proof of concept. Like, this is how we did it. We took it to market. We learned a lot. We've made great customers in the progress, customers that have been through numerous development cycles with Zerv from the very beginning. You have to find your early adopter that's going to work with you, and you have to be honest and transparent with them. We are also a victim or a contributor to overselling very early, and then walking that back is more complicated than just being upfront and honest from the beginning. Be like, this is what it is. This is what it's going to become. We can work on this together. And guess what? You're an early adopter, so you're going to have a lot of influence on what the end product looks like. It's a complicated thing as an entrepreneur to wrap your head around, of like, sometimes you sign up for more than you're capable of or you agree to. And that's one of the biggest pieces of advice I can give, is like, it's progress, not perfection, and find that customer that's going to work through it with you and develop to their spec. And then at the end of it, you'll come out with a scalable solution that everybody else is going to sign up for.
And I have to, when you say that, I think to myself that I don't even consider anything perfect. There's no such thing, right? I mean, there's constantly evolution. There's constantly invention and innovation. I mean, there is nothing that can get to perfect. So if you think in that mindset, you're probably already in the wrong mental place.
100%. And things will surprise you as well. It's like, you'll be going down the hill and the wheels will fall off, and you'll be like, okay, everybody, like, roll up your sleeves. Let's fix this. And then you're better for it.
Yeah. So kind of along those lines too, I'd be curious to hear how you have led through some of those challenges. Because I think for other founders out there, you're going to run into roadblocks, barriers. You're going to fall down, mud on your face, or the pandemic, where some outside force comes in and changes everybody's life. So how do you manage through challenges and issues and all of these things? Not an easy question. I get it.
Not an easy question, but a great question. And for this audience only, 95% of an entrepreneur's journey is not actually knowing what to do. Because it's the first time that, like, most of the time, it's the first time I've experienced it as well, right? So it's like something happens. I'm like, oh, wow. This never happened before.
Yep.
So, but you have to be a leader in the process. And it's like, you try to communicate that to the team. It's like, I have absolutely no idea what I'm doing 95% of the time, because this is my first startup. Maybe by my second one, I'll get a little bit better at it, if, who knows? But it's surround yourself with people who understand that mentality, where it's like, I'm not going to come back and say, I told you so, for making a mistake. I'm going to support you through those conversations. We're going to make a collective decision. We're going to go and we're going to be like, did this work? Great. Did it fail? Fail quick. And let's figure out the next step. And so I'm not sure if that answers your question in its entirety, but I'm still figuring it out, as most of us are. And with the pandemic, that definitely threw, like, nobody had ever experienced this before. Well, in this century at least. And it was like, hey, how do we pivot? How do we bring value when all these things are happening? And we made mistakes and we learned from them. And then we also made a tremendous amount of right decisions, right? We bought a lot of components at a time where, like, components were very rich. And now we are sitting on so much inventory. Like, people are coming to us from our competitors that says our competitors have months and months and months of lead time. And we're like, we have hundreds of thousands of components in stock. So like, cool.
Right.
Yeah.
Cody, I would love to hear a little bit about, we talked to a lot of founders of, disruptive products, creating a new category, a lot of innovation going on out there. And when you're doing that, sometimes articulating what it is that you're offering can be challenging to the marketplace. So how did you go about figuring out that market positioning and the messaging to your target audience?
You have to be agile. You have to understand your product inside and out and pivot or change the message to the target audience in which you're speaking to. So we have 3 areas of focus in 2022. We have commercial, multifamily, and parking. Very different buyer personas. Do the research before the meeting. Look up the person's LinkedIn, know who you're talking to, listen to interviews like this, and understand what motivates them. We've actually started leading conversations with a very simple question. Rank these in levels of 1 to 3. Are you focused on automation, optimization, or sustainability? They all effectively mean the exact same thing. But depending on how the person answers is how you change the narrative to relate to them. Because you can't have sustainability without automation. You can't have automation without optimization. But if you're talking with somebody and I start the conversation with rank it 1, 2, and 3, sustainability, automation, optimization, and they go with sustainability, I immediately know that cost really isn't a topic that we should be talking about. It's all about how do I make your buildings greener? How do I make less carbon footprint? I understand what motivates them. Where if somebody says automation, it's immediately going into dollars, ROI, very different. All are very much the same thing. It's just, it helps me assess the conversation before we go into it.
Yeah, that's fantastic. What did first customers, how did you go about, bringing them in?
So first customers where we started in parking. It was the avenue in which the formation of the company started. And we tested the hypothesis, and we did so in a little bit more of a tortious way where we just started doing, and then we asked for forgiveness later, where we started facilitating Airbnb of parking, which is not allowed, and which got us meetings with the big companies that then were like, okay, this is cool. Definitely don't do that. And if you keep doing that, we're going to come after you. But in return, we'd like to buy your tech because you figured out how to make our legacy system smart. And that helps us automate so that we can get more cars in and out. Then it grew into the pandemic started, and still today our largest customer and our anchor customer is a huge pension plan out of Canada. It's about $160 billion pension plan. And they came to us right when the pandemic started. We had numerous conversations prior, but when the pandemic started, they were trying to go touchless, right? And Zerv was the quickest way to do that. And then, that roadmap has just expanded, and now we're looking at, they have 281 buildings and 32,000 apartment units and a lot of really big opportunities that we're doing unique things for. So the first one was a bull in a china shop kind of approach, which got us customers, got us proof of concept. And then with that, we started having bigger conversations, and then it was about timing. So having a solution at a timing where there was no other option besides spending tremendous amounts of money and ripping and replacing.
Yeah, you've kind of touched on this, but I want to potentially emphasize the part of, going out and listening to initial customers and then adapting either your product or business model. It sounds like you really did listen to folks that you were talking to and not necessarily pivoted, but found your way in a better place.
That's a great way to put it. So what I talk about day in and day out is it's an iceberg. Life's an iceberg, right? So it's at the tip of the iceberg, Zerv as a phone opens a barrier. That's it. So what you see above the water. But then when you go below the water, the data, the optimization, the automation, all of that is specific to the user or to the customer we're talking to's use case. And it's really not a heavy lift on us, because at the tip of the iceberg, we make a phone open a barrier. Underneath of it, it's what do you want that barrier to become? Do you want it to be automatic so that you don't have parking attendants anymore? In a world of labor shortage right now, like we can't get parking attendants. So like maybe it's how you get a rental car out of a huge airport where, taking that 1.5-hour wait line down to 10 minutes because we can't get labor. That's below the surface level, and that's custom to what they want. But what we provide is just simply, we make a phone open that barrier, and then we do a lot of listening. We do understand what our customers' pain points are. But at the end of the day, it all comes back to a phone opening a barrier and what's the reason for it.
Yeah, I think that, and again, I like to pull out these points, and you said it a couple of times. You said in the sales process of being able to understand your customers' pains and adapt your story to it, but then also your trajectory of your business. And I think that that's such an important point that we've heard from other founders. And, again, today is listening, and whether that's in product development, that's sales, marketing, that's such a foundational piece of being a smart founder.
The big takeaway from that is going back to the last point of 95% of the time, I don't know what I'm doing. Most founders don't. But the way to overcome that is to listen to people who do know what they're doing. Take that in, because you don't know what you don't know. So you have to surround yourself with people who can inform you and give you the information, the critical data points to make those decisions. And that's by listening. A lot of people want to talk. Very few people want to listen.
Totally agree.
So Cody, what does the team look like at Zerv? We'd love to hear about, team makeup and what that looks like.
So I think if I understand your question correctly, like we have a lot of software engineers, a lot of hardware engineers. We have a robust operations team. We have an administrative team, human resources. Like we have all of that. The only area where we're a little light on right now is sales. We have a VP of sales that just started a few weeks ago. We have a VP of channel partnerships that's been here for a while, and myself, and then also somebody who runs corporate development and strategy. And like the four of us are really kind of running the initiative, but we don't have like a great account executive outbound lead generation team yet. And it's something that we're looking to bring on very, very quickly. The rest of the organization is pretty well stacked. Obviously software engineers are very few. They're very hard to come by today. So that's always like, if we find exceptional software talent, we'll hire them just for the sake of hire brilliant, find something for somebody brilliant to do. Find something for somebody brilliant to do. You can't pass on those opportunities.
Totally. How do you use any outside resources? We sometimes talk about mentors, other groups, just because I think part of that listening conversation, being a founder and we don't know what we don't know, where else do you try and soak in information to make better decisions?
So yes, we've hired a team that is more of a mentorship to the organization as a whole. Like our C-suite and our VPs come with very, very extensive backgrounds and success to help guide a ship in the right direction, because it's not me, it's we, right? It's a whole company at this point that's coming together to achieve things. I get a lot of my own personal mentorship from my wife, actually. So she's an exceptional read on people, and I lean on her to give me some feedback. I also get I have professional coaches, which I recommend. It's effectively a therapist, for lack of a better term. But it's like a professional coach, somebody who can really help you strategize, communicate, articulate, and without therapists are exceptional at it, because they listen all the time and then they respond, and their response is quite a punch. It's like, hey, you should do these kinds of things to help articulate to a team. So a professional coach is teaching me how to listen to teams and identify strengths and weaknesses and put those in position. So like when the dominoes start falling, that we fall together, kind of thing.
Yeah, it's great.
So yeah, I recommend whether it's an advisor who has done this before, a professional coach, a therapist, a significant other, maybe all the above. But definitely find that person you trust and you can be like uncanned with, like you can be like bluntly honest with them and be like, I don't know what I'm doing. Should I do this? Should I do that? And then like they just listen. At the end of it, it's like not really giving you exact like marching orders, but just new ways of looking at what you're asking and leading you to a decision, which is ultimately your decision. But sometimes influence is helpful.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, I think, we've talked with other founders about how entrepreneurship can sometimes be lonely, and it's good, again, whether it's wife, therapist, mentors, to have other folks to bounce things off of, because it can feel a little bit lonely when you've got a lot, and there are some things with your team and employees that you don't want to share or talk about or expose them to.
100%. There was a gentleman early on in my professional career who told me never let people see you sweat. I disagree with it. Still to this day, I disagree with it, but there are moments where you need to be so passionate about your answer that people don't see the sweat associated with that, or the stress or the concern. Because like when at the tip of the spear at an entrepreneur level, the founder and CEO, when you quiver and you feel like you make people like, quiver is probably the best word for it. When I stutter, the rest of the organization, the ripple effect is massive, right? Mm-hmm. It's like when I say 95% of the time I don't know, but when I do make a decision, it's decisions made, right? Like there's no, like, let's try it, go. Okay, great, it didn't work, but we tried it, right? And it's those kinds of things where you're like, I don't know, I think maybe, sure, what not, let's try 10 things at once. Like those are the things that kill momentum, they kill culture. People start losing faith in ability to lead. And those are really critical. So don't ever let people see you sweat from a leadership perspective, but then confine in those few people that you're like, I'm losing my mind over here. Like, what are we doing? And sweat to those few people.
That's right.
Cody, I'm curious to hear more about your coach, because we have, I think it's the first time that the idea of a coach has come up. We hear a lot about mentors and, people that, find others in an entrepreneurial community, so on and so forth. But when did you make the decision to seek out a coach, and then how did you find your coach?
We're going to get really personal on this one, guys. So hang with me. So it was more of a relationship therapist that then became like, hey, let's not do this and let's focus on like professional. And it was like helping me communicate with my wife, and so that we could have a very enduring relationship, and like we can better like in line, because we have different like love languages and those kinds of things. But then it became so much more than that. It became okay, this person is exceptional at helping identify and relate and communicate to different personalities. And that's how I found my coach. So it's not an entrepreneurial coach at all. It's a professional life coach on how to assess people, how to communicate more effectively, how to motivate, because there are different people. Some people are financially motivated. Some people are like personally motivated, professionally motivated. Like you throw a bunch of money at somebody who doesn't care about money, guess what? You're not going to get a yield out of them. Like you need to be able to understand, listen, and adopt those kinds of things. So I found mine just through seeking out better means of communicating with like my significant other. And then that turned into like, I lean on this person. We found somebody else, and now this person has filled a professional coaching role in my life.
It's really interesting, and I appreciate you sharing that. And the reason I brought it up is because for people that are watching that are maybe maybe they're located somewhere where there's not a big, community of startups and entrepreneurs, where they just don't really know, how to reach out, or maybe they're a little more introverted. Whatever the case is, we've heard a lot of that, finding mentors in these communities and whatnot. But if you don't have that, I love this idea of the coach, because as a founder, those relationships and that communication is, absolutely critical. And so really interesting stuff. And I appreciate you sharing that.
A founder is about getting help, right? Like a founder can't do it all. It's not a sole proprietorship. It is a company. And it's like, you need help. And anybody who says, I know the answer, once again, they either don't know or they're lying. And however you find help, my interpretation of the world is all around communication. It's how do you relate? How do you communicate? How do you drive a path forward? And my help came through the means of professional life coach, right? And they're easy, not easy, but like there's a million out there, and you don't even have to see people in person anymore. I've actually never met my life coach in person. It's all through Zoom calls, and it's once a week, and we get on, and it's what's going on. How do I listen? How do I help guide some strategy? And how do I provide help? And she's exceptional.
That's awesome.
You used the word culture a little bit ago. I'd love to hear what's your approach to building culture in an organization.
I don't know yet. I do honestly mean that. That is one of the single largest things that you think you know, and then something kind of blindsides you a little bit, where it's like maybe there's subcultures that can be hurtful or something like that, because when you it's lonely at the top. It's not, you do need to make decisions which sometimes impact other parts of the organization. My approach to culture is, I'm a raging optimist. So I believe you could tell me you cure cancer. I believe you. I promise you I would. And I wouldn't even ask for proof. I'm like, that's my mentality. I'm like, great. Why would you lie to me? And so that's the culture that I breed, of like trust, implicit trust right out of the gate. And I think that works well for some people. Other people are a little bit more pessimistic. And so therefore, the culture is work hard, trust in one another, and we'll accomplish a lot. But then again, I don't know.
No, and I think that's a reasonable answer. I started my company 20 years ago, and culture is still this amorphous, challenging thing. And, as we bring on new folks, it changes. As you make decisions in the business, it shifts. And so, there isn't an easy answer to culture. And so I think any insight into where you are, even helping other founders, both of us sharing that there is no magic silver bullet out there for a great culture is a good thing for people to understand.
And I think if you're a good person, you can create a good culture. It's like everybody's had those jobs where it's like you weren't trusted, and like out of the gate, there was a lot of micromanagement and those kinds of things. It's like, just trust and believing. And that's kind of what I lead with, but I don't know if that's actually creating a culture of scale yet. Like I said, I don't know. We're getting big enough now that there's a lot of even little micro subcultures that are being formed, which some are great, some are bad. And it's a chapter that's still to be written.
So getting back to the product a little bit and all of those pieces, you came from a finance background. How have you gone about the process of looking at, when you need technology or software and some of these things that may not be in your background? Obviously, it's bringing in the right people, but, are there any secrets to kind of how you plan and look at those things and evolve them over time?
Yeah, so there's definitely road mapping of like, hey, what do we envision the future of Zerv to contribute to the world? So it's like there's a clear what's going on today. There's a clear what's going on a week from today and a month from today. And then there's like a huge gray area between month 2 and 6. And then it gets a little bit more clear at like 12 to year 10, right? Month 12 to year 10. It's just, there's always gray areas. So how do we allocate resources? How do we bring on talent? How do we roadmap out product? The reason there's a gap between like month 6 and month 12 is because we don't know, especially in the economy we're in now, where there's inflation and supply chain shortages and growing risk of return to work and return to office, actually not return to work, but return to office and migration of employees. And a lot of these things are changing all the time. So the gray area is just because most people can't strategize beyond 12 months. They can do fine until 6, and then beyond 12, it's a little bit easier. But between 6 and 12, that's where the gray area is, the unknown, the uncertainty. And so that's why you make the best decision based off the data you have today, based off of where the product is going. You allocate resources based off budget, right? It's like, hey, maybe we can't hire this operations person because we need to hire this product person. Maybe we can't do this product person because we need to put on sales. I would say the secret sauce is knowing the finances, knowing the money, where the money's coming from and how it's going out. That's probably the clearest path to understanding roadmap. And then the rest of it, it's best guess.
No, that's great. And I think in the entrepreneurial operating system, which is EOS, which is kind of a methodology out there, it talks about the owner, the founder being, that has to be one of their pieces, is understanding, is the company going to have enough cash flow, and whether that's capital raising, understanding your cash flow as a company, whatever it might be. And that is an important piece because it drives a lot of the decisions in a business. Absolutely. I'm kind of curious to hear how did the pandemic influence the business, and both from a customer perspective, cost perspective, employees. It's such a big thing in all of our lives. How did it end up impacting your business?
Yes. We were on like everybody, the first 6 months of the pandemic was incredibly scary. There was a lot of unknown uncertainty. And so that time was, just kind of scrapping by, trying to figure out. We did a lot of like really creative things. Like we gave our technology away for at no cost to people in the parking industry who were struggling to like make payroll. So we're like, hey, can we help you automate so you can keep more people on staff? So we did a little bit of charity during the beginning of the pandemic, which actually in return gave us a pretty long tail of opportunity, because now people look at Zerv as like, they helped us stay in business, so therefore I trust them. Which it was kind of the intent.
Yeah.
The intent was to help them stay in business, because like the customers that we spent all this time building up relationships were now on the verge of bankruptcy because, parking, nobody really gave parking too much thought, but like there was nobody going to retail. There was nobody going to restaurants. There was nobody going to hotels or the office. Like, so therefore they canceled their monthly parking permit and they were getting no revenue. Like that was terrible. So, at least retail, you had e-commerce, you had like order on the phone, deliver like coffee and those kinds of things. And some people were still in the office paying rent and those kind of things, but parking completely destroyed. And they had huge leases that they had to pay with effectively zero forgiveness. So like we went to them and then they became voice of customer, very, very big advocates of some of the things that we've done, because at the time where everybody else was trying to sell to them, like we were like, we don't want anything. We just want you to stay in business. Please just don't go anywhere. So, did that answer your question? I don't.
Yeah. And then are you, is your company remote? Have you brought folks back to the office? How do you handle that from an internal perspective?
Very good. Yeah. So we're kind of all over the country now. So Chicago, I'm in Nashville, Atlanta, Dallas, LA, San Francisco, like everybody's kind of all over. So we have really embraced the remoteness of the pandemic. With that being said, we have electrical engineers that need to be in close proximity. Our UPS bill has gone through the roof because now everything's overnighted between like people. So there's definitely, we do have offices. We do have like central distribution of technology coming in and then being distributed and shipped out that people go into. It's really up to the individual. Do they want to work collectively with somebody else? Do they want to be in close proximity? And if so, great. There's locations in which you can do that. Maybe you want to be on a beach in Bermuda and working. Great. You're an exceptional software developer. Do that. whatever makes you creative. So going back to your last question, I think the pandemic has made it more willing to embrace what makes that employee or that customer comfortable, and then really allowing that.
Yeah, I agree.
Somewhat related to that, Cody, with all the variables that are out there, so hardware, software, remote team, how do you, as the founder, how do you drive vision forward and really communicate those things with all the team members, kind of allowing people to see where it is Zerv is going? What are some of the things that you do to articulate your vision?
So, we get together effectively every quarter. We fly into somewhere cool. We spend a week. We strategize. We roadmap, and we really just we get together and we have a good time. Another important aspect is we go out, we drink, we get to know each other. We do fun activities. Like those are the important things that are lost when you're remote. Of like, hey, who do I trust? Who do I lean on? How do I get to know them on a personal level? Outside of that, we do like fun weekly activities. We call it Rise and Shine, where it's like a water cooler talk every Wednesday where we take 30 minutes and everybody comes on and we do like fun activities. Like, if you were an Olympian, what sport would you do? Kind of like fun, like creative questions and things like that. And we have somebody who leads up our human resources who's exceptional at employee engagement, and does fun things like that. And then it's really around video calls. It's really important to be on a video. Like, don't make a phone call, get on a video. See, hear. Also, don't put meetings back to back so you're rushing to it. Like, allow for that time to chat through and be creative, versus so slammed in schedules. Because, everybody now, it's like, I'm 5 minutes late to my video, to my next meeting. But half the innovation comes through like not being rushed, right? Being able to think through new creative ways to attack an old problem. And that's not solved within an hour with a hard stop.
I love that approach. So thoughtful, and it's something that we have not heard, but it makes so much sense, right? So in today's age of back-to-back video calls, yeah, putting in a little buffer there. So
put in some buffer. And also make them 20 minutes, like schedule 20 with 40 minutes, nothing scheduled beyond it. It's like, if you can get everything accomplished in 20, be done. But if for some reason it goes to 30, 45, 50, an hour long meeting, there's no hard stop. How many times you get on conference? I have a hard stop in 30 minutes. Mm-hmm. God, like, thank you for telling me I'm not important. Cool.
I'm curious, do you have what's the 10-year vision? What's the big, hairy, audacious goal? Like, as a founder, what are you looking out into the horizon at?
Yeah, so definitely we are looking to disrupt the world of proprietary closed systems that don't like to work well together. So our 10-year vision is like, I see, Andy, you walking down the street and maybe there's a car that you don't own, but you can be like, hey, Google, can you let me into this car? And it's like, no problem. You are an accredited person to borrow this car for an hour. It unlocks it. You start off and you go and you run those things. A lot more efficiency is the 10-year vision. Also, maybe like right now, there's so much greenhouse gases that are being contributed to last mile delivery services and overconsumption of like very, very carbon emitting like vehicles, like, right? Like I don't know how many vehicles you have, but most families of four don't only have 2 vehicles now. There's like 3. There's a lot more contribution happening, and then there's other families who absolutely don't and have like e-bikes and scooters, and connecting those people. Like, hey, we both ordered something from Macy's. I have a car, you don't have a car. You borrow my car to go pick up at Macy's, but while you're there, can you pick up my stuff at Macy's as well as a trade for borrowing my car during that transaction? The 10-year vision is taking all assets as they exist today, opening them up, and the collaboration ecosystem that comes from that.
That's great.
Really cool. Cody, how has your role as founder, how has that changed over time, and where do you spend the most of your time these days?
It hasn't changed as much as I'm still very much involved in a lot of day-to-day sales of product. As it's morphing now with the onboarding of senior leadership from channel partnerships and sales, like I'm now getting a lot more over the business than in the business, which is a very exciting feeling because it allows me to contribute more from product development to professional development of employees to road mapping of potential partnerships and strategic acquisitions and future fundraising rounds. So it's still today probably more hands-on than in continuation of the last 4 years, but it is changing pretty rapidly here with new senior leadership coming in. So I would say as we bring on specific leaders within product, within operations, within sales, like once that happens, I get to kind of portion off that business and step back from ownership of that business unit and then focus more energy on something else. So it has been an exciting transition. And really the only thing remaining today is, circa a month ago was sales. So now with sales coming on board, it's now I get to be over top of a lot of business units than being involved in the day-to-day of that business unit.
So what's the near-term future for the company look like? What are you looking to accomplish in the next 6 months to a year?
Yeah. Continued growth, continued headcount, continued product development, all of those things are very much on the roadmap. In addition to that, we're getting very involved in making the world a better place from a green perspective. So we're getting very heavily involved in EV charging and logistics and fleet management and optimization of underutilized assets. So the near-term objective would really be how do we make a ESG approach that helps companies carbon offset, to help companies run greener, to save utility costs, to do those kinds of things that actually make a global impact. So we're really focused on some of the green initiatives that come as collateral to our solution.
So before I ask, we've typically got like a final question that I like to ask. Why don't you tell us a little bit about where folks can find you and how they could interact with the company and just a little bit more about how they can connect?
Yeah, so being B2B, we're very heavy on LinkedIn. That's probably the best way to follow along with progress. We do a lot of blog posts. We do a lot of case studies. We do a lot of stuff on LinkedIn. And it's just Zerv Access, and Zerv is ZERV as in Victor. And then Access is the unique handle. Our website is zervaccess.com, and then that will direct you to LinkedIn. We also have Contact Us, and we do a lot in HubSpot from like outbound. So if you want to subscribe, we can give you some information there. Also, my email is pretty readily available. So if you're looking for something to potentially interview and or apply for some Zerv positions and you want to be involved on that level, my email is just my first last name at Zerv Inc. Actually, so my email address is a little different. So it's at zervinc.com. And I welcome anybody to reach out and happy to chat. So yeah, LinkedIn is probably the best way to follow along with progress.
Yeah, that's great. So I'm kind of curious. I ask everybody this: is if you could go back to before you started the business and have coffee with yourself, is there any advice that you would give?
Wow. This would have been that question, Andy, I wanted you to prepare me for when I asked you 45 minutes ago. I was like, no, it's a great, I think my feedback to myself circa 4 years ago, or my inspiration to myself circa 4 years ago is, good question. And I'm just gonna say what's off the cuff here. It's, I can't make everybody happy. And I am very much a person that's motivated by acceptance of like making people feel motivated and happy and pleased with what I'm doing. And it's becoming a lot more reality that it's, some people just aren't going to like our product, aren't going to like our solution, aren't going to like, the pricing, and maybe they don't even like me, and that's the other thing. It's like, that is the hard truth at the end of the day, that it's, you can't make everybody happy. And for that advice at that critical point in my professional development would have been, accept the fact that you're going to lose a lot of people. You're going to lose a lot of customers. You're going to lose a lot of friends. You're going to lose a lot of these kinds of things that life goes in different directions sometimes, and accept that and know that the relationships that stay will become tighter. And so that's the feedback I'd give.
I think that's great. I mean, I think there is so much truth to the fact that if you can't make everybody happy, and if you spend too much time trying to do that, you let down the folks that you really can. So that's fantastic.
Yeah. So that's a good question. Thanks, Andy.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much, Cody. We appreciate you spending the time here with us. For those tuning in, again, check out Zerv and follow Cody on LinkedIn. We look forward to seeing everybody next week. But again, thanks again, Cody. Have a great day.
Likewise, Tony. Appreciate the time, and thanks for inviting me to be part of the show.
Absolutely. Appreciate
Thanks, Cody. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.